He got hold of his gun, a Luger, got his driver. It was a simple execution.
On the 9th of March 1966, inside the Blind Beggar pub in London's East End, feared enforcer George Cornell was gunned down. His killer was Ronnie Kray.
My husband said, the Krays have been arrested. I said, oh, they've been arrested before. He said, no, this is very serious. They've been arrested for murder.
I'm Matt from Underworld Uncut. This week we're going into our archives to examine one of the most infamous killings in British criminal history, the murder of George Cornell.
George Cornell, he grew up with the Kray twins. He knew them better than we would ever know them. He grew up with them.
George Cornell was an East Ender who had been brought up around the Cable Street area, and the Cable Street gang were in opposition to the Krays when they were growing up as kids. So the Krays and their group from Bethnal Green often fought with the Cable Street group, who were usually made up largely of dockers because it was that much closer to the docks.
He was good to me. In fact, he used to give me a fiver, which I used to get $2.50 a week, you know, for working all the week in the fish market. And if I'd done a job for him, he'd give me a fiver, and now and then he'd give me a fiver. He'd say, get your mum a bunch of flowers. He said, and give her the fucking change. He said, I'll be after you. That was George Cornell. I liked him. I know he's probably took a few liberties like anyone else, but he was a nice bloke. He was good to me.
George was a good guy. He was all right. He even come to work with me in my little firm at one stage, you know, and he was solid.
Well, he was friendly with the twins, but he was more friendly with the Richardsons because people really didn't want to be on the Kray firm. There weren't a lot of money involved. The twins had all the money, they could spend it like water. But the firm hardly had any money at all. That's why I never wanted to be on them. And I think maybe George Cornell had the same kind of feelings. I don't want to be on the Kray firm. There's nothing there for me. But I could exploit the Richardsons. There's money there. You know, they were more about getting hold of money, seeing opportunities and following them through. And that was because they had all the one-armed bandits, of course, in most of the clubs in London, which was like a lot of money involved there. And so that's where Cornell went and became an enforcer for them.
Started to work with the Richardsons, and he was a valued member of the Richardsons firm, and he was a very, very serious, violent man, if necessary.
There were signs obvious to the firm that George Cornell's days were numbered.
Well, George was going round and he told a woman named May Morris that her son, he was a young up-and-coming boxer at the time, and Ronnie liked him. And he went and told May Morris, the boy's mother, that Ronnie Kray was gay and he was after Mickey, her son. About 2 weeks before he killed him, I was in the Grave Morris and Reggie come up to me and he said, I want you to run us somewhere in a minute. And I took him up to the Stalk in Swallow Street, the club. And it was early in the evening, 8 o'clock. You know, they don't start business till like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And when we arrived there, George Cornell was sitting at a table with a drink. And Ronnie went to me, come, we'll sit on this side. I want on another table. I don't want to sit with him, he went. He was mumbling, he used to mumble, Ronnie. And he mumbled for about 10 minutes. I had a couple of drinks and Reggie talked to George Cornell. And when we come out, they never said a word to one another in the car. I drove all the way back from the West End to Whitechapel. They never said one word to one another.
Tensions between Ronnie Kray and George Cornell continued to build.
He'd just been to visit, I think, little Jimmy Andrews, who had been shot in the leg. Him and LB Woods. And as they were coming away, George see the blind beggar. Oh, he said, look, the old blind beggar. LB, let's go in there for a drink. And they went in, and someone told Ronnie.
On the 9th of March 1966, shortly after 8:30 p.m, Ronnie Kray entered the Blind Beggar pub.
He and Barry, who'd never done anything, he went with him and fired a gun into the ceiling. Never thinking for 1 minute that Ronnie was going to kill George Cornell.
In an almost empty pub, George was sat on a stool at the far end of the bar.
He said, I pointed it like that. He said, I pulled the trigger. I said, what did he do? What did he started to see fear in his eyes when he saw the gun.
Ron Kray entered and shot George Cornell in the head.
How can a normal man go in a pub in daylight and shoot a man in the head?
Ronnie Kray walked out of the pub without a word and slid into his waiting car. When police stormed in, the silence was absolute. No one had seen a thing. George Cornell was pronounced dead on arrival at hospital.
Never, ever, ever kill anyone yourself. Get somebody else to do it. What did he do, Ronnie? He walked in the Blind Beggars and he shot George Cornell stone dead in front of people in the pub. George Cornell was a violent man, and when he got killed, people say, well, it goes with the territory.
London's underworld each had their own theories as to why Ronnie Kray shot George Cornell.
Well, that's the tragedy. He fell in love with a girl from South London, from near the castle. Very nice girl, top shoplifter. Fell in love with her, married her and moved over to her. And Reggie and Ronnie couldn't handle that. They thought he had deserted them by moving over there. That's where they were on very bright there. Instead of congratulating him, have an happy marriage, George, good luck, terrific, and that. But they held that against him. They thought he deserted them. That's how daft they were there.
Cornell had had a fight with Ron Kray and he'd beaten up Ron Kray quite badly, so Ron had a grudge against Cornell. And Cornell had also thrown a very nasty insult at Ron Kray as well. So when he found out that Cornell was drinking in the Blind Beggar pub, he decided to take his revenge. He got hold of his gun, a Luger, got his driver, they drove to the Blind Beggar pub. It was a simple execution. It was pretty straightforward.
And they thought he'd moved over to the Richardsons, which wasn't true at all. That's why he got shot dead. Simple as that.
The real motive behind the murder remains debated, and every insider tells it differently.
He was in the Brown Bear in Aldgate, George. Ronnie Kray found out, well, you've got little spiders, little grasses, like, going about. So, anyway, Ronnie Kray's got his driver, take him down there, and he's going to stick it on Georgie Cornell. When Georgie come out the pub, they had a fight, Georgie knocked him out. That's why he was an embarrassment for him from that way. And that's why he shot him in Blind Beggars. So you've heard so many tales, people make their own stories up, you know.
I think personally he'd insulted Ronnie and he had to be dealt with. I mean, somebody called Ronnie a fat puff. What happened? The guy got his jaw broke. You know, Donahue, who was one of their henchmen, one of their chief henchmen, he got shot for an insult. So they were, you know, it could not take an awful lot for Ronnie to want to kill somebody.
Cornell's murder sent shockwaves through the underworld, but for some, it came as little surprise.
I went out with a mate of mine, Mickey Holland, we went fishing. And I said to Ronnie, I'll see you tonight, like, I won't be out today. I mean, then went fishing. We got back in London about 6 o'clock. Someone said, George Cornell's got shot in the beggar. But when you're joking, I knew right away who'd done it, you know. It was no news to me, like, you know, I know.
Ronnie, when he didn't take his Stemisol, which was a drug to keep him, you know, his paranoia and everything else down, he was out of control. And it could have happened to anybody. Hence what happened to the Blind Beggar. He just walked in and shot a guy.
Well, I just don't know what come over Ronnie. That's why I say on those drugs, when he got these manic urges on him, he would go out and do something really dangerous. He was a dangerous person. And nobody knew what he was going to do. He just went and did it. I mean, he just walked in there in front of witnesses and loads of people and shot the man in the head. And it's a miracle shot because his blinders are bad. He couldn't see to drive or anything. It was just a fluke, really, how he did it.
Everyone knew who killed George Cornell. It still took police 2 years to find witnesses willing to talk. One by one, they turned the firm against the Krays. And in the time it took to bring the case together, a second murder took place. Reggie had repeatedly stabbed Jack the Hat McVitie. Police believed they had enough evidence for 2 murder charges. In a dawn swoop on the 9th of May 1968, Scotland Yard apprehended the Krays and their remaining loyal associates in a series of sudden arrests.
The first I knew about it, funnily enough, was from the newspaper the next morning. I was married at the time. My husband said, the Krays have been arrested. I said, oh, well, they've been arrested before. You know, why is it on front page of like 4 or 5 newspapers? He said, no, this is very serious. They've been arrested for murder. And, you know, quite innocently, you say, murder? Who's murdered? Who have they murdered? You think they're talking about these 2 people that I'm in their mother's home every week. I've been out with them socially. I've been into nightclubs where they've been gentlemen, and you wouldn't even swear or be rough when they were there, when women especially was concerned. Who did they murder? And they said, well, apparently they've murdered somebody in the Blind Beggar pub, and Reggie's I said, I can't believe it, let me read it. Then you start reading in the evening news and all the other newspapers, and I thought, well, I better go and see Violet, because she must be devastated. And when I got there, she was crying, and one of her sisters, I think it was May, was in with her, and really, I said, what's happened, Violet? She said they just apparently arrived at 6 in the morning and just didn't even knock, kicked the door off. And then she said, can they do that? She said, and they've taken them away. She said, and apparently I can't see them till tomorrow. She said, how could they murder anybody? Who would they have to murder? I mean, you know, Ronnie in his dark mood, she'd say, he'd just have a fight and it would all be over. But she could never see either of her sons being murderers.
He used to go into these manic, depressive mood swings, you know. And you never knew what he was going to be from one day to the next.
The trial began in January 1969, but this wasn't just for one murder. Controversially, this trial was for 2.
So the submission was these 2 brothers had both been charged with murder. The George Cornell murder, there was the McVitie murder, where several of us were charged. So what they said was, because it was alleged, and I never heard that, I've done mine, you do yours, they were able to join up the 2 murders together. They joined the 2 trials together. It's been the first time in history they ever did it, and I don't think they've ever done it since, where they've joined up 2 murder trials together. Because normally, the Cornell murder would have stood on its own, and it would have had no impactment on the McVitie murder, or the McVitie murder would not have had any impact on the people involved in the Cornell murder. But they joined them both together, and that's the way the trial went.
Well, the longest trial in British history up to the time, and every morning, every night was on the news. You saw the vans coming in with the noise, crowds outside.
I sat through the whole Cornell case, like a couple of other people, and their names wasn't mentioned once through the whole prosecution case. So I said, what am I doing? They're supposed to have met all the defence lawyers and had severance of the 2 trials. So there were 2 separate trials with separate juries. But of course, they're looking at me for how many weeks did the first trial start? About 4 weeks in the Cornell case. And the master was saying, what's he doing sitting in the dock there, you know? His name's not been mentioned once. There's no, you know, and that wasn't. My name wasn't even mentioned once, but I had to sit there. And I said, I'm going to not refuse to go in the court. I'm going to stay in my cell. And he said, don't do that. And the lawyer said, you'll upset Melford. You'll upset the judge, you know, and he'll get the needle with you. I said, that's all right, but that's nice, isn't it? Threatening and intimidating me, you know, that's justice for you, yeah?
why, at the time, why the hell was Freddie Foreman standing there? He wasn't what we call part of the Kray gang. He was a South Londoner. I'd met him several times, always a gentleman to me.
Oh, they were selling tickets to get in the public gallery, yeah. They were standing in queues outside and making them money out of it. And you used to get film stars turn up, the famous Hollywood film stars, if they was over here, they would be sitting in, because it was 6 months of it, going up and down every week.
When I went to court on this certain day, I went with an old friend of mine from the East End, an old villain, but not involved with the twins. He said, look up there, who's sitting up there in the gallery? And I just looked at 30 people. He said, that's Charlton Heston. I said, don't be, you know, you'd seen Ben-Hur and all these things. I said, don't be ridiculous. He said, it's Charlton Heston. Oh, I thought, well, what's he doing there? Surely he can't be a witness. Was he sitting in the gallery? But that's the sort of macabre things that happened at this trial, that, you know, a lord turned up one day and a film star the next day, and then one of the biggest film stars in the world at the time, Charlton Heston, and that was all splashed across the paper. Did they know Charlton Heston? How was he? Could he be involved? Had they met him when they were in America? Of course they didn't. He was in London at the time, heard about this magnificent trial that was going on and had nothing to do that day and took himself to the Old Bailey. I mean, it's quite, you can't believe it, but it's true.
At first, it looked like the Krays were untouchable. No one was crazy enough to take the stand against them. But inside that courtroom, everything was about to change.
Then, all of a sudden, came the witnesses. And when you looked up, you thought, well, what's he doing there? Surely he should be in the dock with the twins, because he's a member of the firm. He's done skullduggery. You know, Donahue. What's Donahue standing in the witness box for? This tall, gangly man, and then all of a sudden he started telling all the stories about what they had done, and all the money changing hands, and the violence, and the fact that you know, he knew about the 2 murders. So I thought, oh God, it's going wrong, and I don't think I'll come back. But I did go back one other time after that, near into the end, when it was all going wrong, and all of a sudden, the worst thing that happened, the barmaid. Once that barmaid walked into that court, and I looked at the twins, and they were shocked. They never dreamed that barmaid, after all this time, in fear of her life, would ever be made to come forward. But Nipper Reid used her that was his trump card. And of course she was perfect, because she immediately said, that's the man, that's Ronnie Kray. And, you know, when the defence said to her, well, how do you know it's Ronnie Kray? You know, has he ever been in your pub before? Did he use that pub? Which he never did, because he hated the pub. He never ever went in the Blind Beggars except that one night, and look what happened. She said, no, but I know it's Ronnie Kray, because I saw him walk in and shoot Mr. Cornell. But you said you were down in the cellar. Well, I had to say that because I was told to say that, and I was in fear of my life and of my family's lives. I knew then that was the end.
I had my doubts until the barmaid got in the dock. This young girl, or young woman, spoke like an angel, and you could not fail to listen and be moved by the things she said, by the fear. Although she could give evidence, or previously, you know, give a statement that she never knew what had happened, you could tell this was a girl that was speaking the truth.
On the 4th of March 1969, justice was delivered. Ronnie Kray was convicted of the murder of George Cornell, joined by his associate, John Ian Barry.
Just before that trial, remember, the Richardson had got 20 years. So they're thinking to themselves, well, you know, maybe they just want to get rid of the gangs of London. We are the next ones. They're over south. We're the East End. It's our turn. So you can imagine the shock when the judge said, you know, society has earned a rest from you. You're going away for 30 years. The minimum of 30 years. You're getting life, but the minimum. Had he not added that bit on, had he said life, it can mean 15 and onwards. But when he said the minimum of 30 years, the press went mad, because I think nobody in the press thought they'd get 30 years. And Viola, I think that's when her world crumbled, because she's thinking, well, they're 35. They're never going to be free in her lifetime. You know, they'd be 65, and she probably would be long gone.
Can I tell you a little story? If you go back to biblical times, you've got Moses with a staff. In hand, it was in control. The minute he throws that staff on the floor, it turns into a snake. Out of hand, it's out of control. And that was Ronnie Kray. Without the medication, without proper support, that man should have been put somewhere whereabouts he would have been taken care of, looked after in the proper way. And he had a still vice-like grip on Reggie's emotions, and I think many things happened that would never have happened, both to Charlie and Reggie, if it hadn't have been for Ronnie, you know.
The murder of George Cornell marked a turning point in London's criminal underworld. A brutal act that set the downfall of the Kray twins in motion. Ronnie died behind bars on the 17th of March 1995.
On the 29th of October 1967, Jack the Hat McVitie was murdered by Reggie Kray. We asked 4 London gangsters what really happened that night.
The Krays kept Jack the Hat's money.
And Jack went in there to shoot him.
I met Jack and he started telling me all about what had happened.
I said, what's the matter? He said, they've killed Jack.
You know, it took 40 years for me to find out exactly what happened and the reasons why that they did kill him that particular weekend. But it wasn't intentional at first, because what happened, they'd paid him to do a certain job, which he never did, and he got drunk and he was always high on drugs. Jack, I know Jack, I'd been to his house and 1 or 2 things. With Jack, he went to the Regency Club on one occasion and he was drunk and high on drugs. And he had a shotgun and he was going to shoot any one of the Krays. And the 2 doormen had a struggle with him on a door. The gun went off and blew a hole in the door of the Regency Club. And that word, and they took the gun off him and he ran away. And Reggie was sitting inside at the bar having a drink. It was after his wife had died, so he was still in a morbid state and getting drunk all the time. But he was vulnerable at that stage. And Jack went in there to shoot him. And these 2 guys came to see me 4 years later in the Punch Bowl pub. And they said, we'll tell you now what happened, Fred. They had a struggle with Jack, took the gun off of him. And then a few days later, they met Jack, the twins, and he said, all right, we'll reinstate you, Jack. We'll put you back on the firm and give him a few more quid. And he said, you've only done this because I come round to shoot you the weekend. And he opened his mouth and dropped himself right in it. And that they looked at each other and they realised what he'd done and how dangerous he was.
Well, Jack, they put him with Freddie Foreman to do a gold bullion job at Southwark Bridge. It was a put-up thing, but the Krays were given the job and they put Jack the Hat on it with Freddie Foreman. It was Freddie that sold the gold, and what he did, I'll give him his due, Freddie Foreman. He sent Jack the Hat's money and the Krays' drink, sent the money over to him, right? And what they did, they gave Jack the Hat the drink and they kept Jack the Hat's money. And the house they bought in Suffolk, the Brooks, that was with Jack's money. And then when he found out, he went down at the Regency. If they'd have been there, he'd have shot him. He'd have killed him. But they wasn't there that night. And that's when they found out that he was going about and to shoot him and all that, like, you know. And I think that's why they killed him. But he's my mate, Jack. He's a good fella. I've had some right laughs with him, you know.
But I did tell Jack, when all this trouble first come up, I told you I was on the run. I'd hardly see Ronnie and Reggie, you know. And I was on the run. And I was in a pub called the Farley Arms. I was Stoke Newington. And I met Jack.
That's where I used to drink with.
And he started telling me all about what had happened. And I said to him, well, I've heard from other sources that you've been ranting and raving, Jack. I said, if I was you, there's another thing. I said, I'd wipe my mouth and just leave it. But he never listened, you know. Next thing, someone else told me they killed him.
In Blonde Carroll's, that was,
yeah.
In every mode.
When it come to the night of the party in Blonde Carroll's, Roddy Kray smashed him in the face with a glass and told him to go, to use the F word and go. And he went out of the room and he turned around and came back in again. And he could have walked out of the house, he could have gone out. And they sat there and they were screaming at each other and arguing, and it went on for quite a considerable time. And there was witnesses there, 2 young guys who were croupiers who made statements to this effect, and a lot of other witnesses made statements, but they were never produced at the trial, those statements, which they should have been. And that would prove that it wasn't premeditated to kill him that night, but it was got out of hand, and that's when a knife was produced by one of that firm, pulled it out of the kitchen and gave it to one of the twins, which was a stupid thing to do. And that's how he got killed. I mean, when Jack the Hat, I was in my bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was asleep when all this thing was going on. And they wanted me to help them out to clear up the scene afterwards.
I didn't want to go to the Regency because Saturday night gangsters, you get them out, they're drunk and they cause problems and all the rest of it. But we did go. And whilst we were there, Jack the Hat McVitie came over. Hello, Chris, how you going? And chatting away. And after about an hour or so, he said, where you going? I said, well, we're going to West End. But we'd been invited to a party. Well, party, I'm up for that. I'm coming to that one. So we all piled in this car, because my car's parked up. So in them days, it didn't matter whether you had a drink. I mean, the law wasn't such that you would stop for breathalyzers and all the rest of it back in the 60s. So we went to a girl called Blonde Carroll's house where this party was. All got out of Jack's car and all went in. The 2 Mills brothers as well. We'd never met Jack and never met anybody else. There were other people down there. So the last thing in the world you're going to expect is somebody's going to be murdered in front of a whole load of witnesses. So we go down, Jack runs into the room. And what I can't understand is a week before, I'd seen Reggie and Jack shaking hands, or were talking to each other when they sat on a table privately. So the last thing in my mind is that Reggie's going to attack him. So when we go down the party, some kind of altercation starts, and Reggie is talking to Jack. Ronnie comes over and punches Jack in front of all these witnesses. And the next thing, it just kicks off. Now I get very upset about this and make my position known. So I go out to the bottom of the stairs, and Ronnie comes out and said, what's the problem? I said, Ronnie, we didn't come down here for this. We come down here for a party. And he said to a guy called Connie White, take him home. So Connie White had dropped me off back at my house, and my dad was alive, God rest his soul. And I walked in, and I sat there with my dad. He said, what's the matter, where's Tony? I said, well, Dad, I'm going to go and get him. And I went and got a gun, 38 Webley, and called a taxi, and I went back to the house, Blonde Carroll's house. I went and got my car, and then went back to Blonde Carroll's house and knocked at the door. And Ronnie Bender came up, and I said, where's Tony? He said, he's not here. So I went to turn away, said, Chris, don't leave me. I said, what do you mean, don't? What's the matter? He said, they've killed Jack. No, I said, never in a million years, not in front of all them people. He said, he's downstairs. He's dead. So I said, what's your instructions? He said, to get rid of him. I said, well, Blonde Carroll will be back in a minute with Georgie Plummer. There's 2 children asleep upstairs, and you're meant to get rid of on your own. What are you going to do? Well, they told me to throw him over the railway bridge and the train would mash him up. I couldn't leave him. The guy had not long been out of the army. The Krays employed him as a driver, and thereby, you know, incapable of doing it. He's meant to throw Jack over his shoulder, take him up to the railway bridge, which is maybe 50 yards away, chuck him over, and that was to be his duty. The Krays had run off and left him there with it. So anyway, I go in. I said, listen, get yourself a pair of socks, put them on your hands, put the socks on our hands, and we cleaned that place down from top to bottom.
Burnt it. And pole, they had a pole.
Yeah, yeah.
He had a breaker's yard and he used to smelt a lot of alley.
It's in my book.
So he used to dump them in a big deep freeze.
That's right.
He had a big chest freezer. You freeze them up there for about a week. Then you know them saws they cut the meat and the fish with. He had a whole one of them.
Saws.
He used to saw them up, put them in the smelt, they were gone in and out.
That's where the bodies went.
And Jack was laying in the middle of the room. I went upstairs and I took an eiderdown off of Lon Carroll's bed, wrapped him in it. In the meantime, a knock at the door and Tony comes back. So he'd been home and my dad said I'd gone looking for him and Tony knew where I'd go. And so he came in and I roped him into helping us get Jack. So then there's an argument about who's going to drive Jack's car. And Ronnie Bender said, I'm not going to drive it. And Tony says, somebody's got to drive it. In the meantime, Lon Carroll comes back, so this is a tragedy of errors. Never mind about a comedy of errors, it's a tragedy of errors. So she's told to go into the bedroom and stay there. There's been a bit of an argument, a fight, it's got to be cleaned up. Tony, I and Ronnie Bender get Jack into his car on the back seat. Tony drives the car. We follow Tony up from Evering Road and going round, and I'll tell you the truth, a police car fell in behind Tony. There is no way they're going to take my brother. It hadn't long been that Harry Roberts had killed 3 policemen. And that night, it could have happened that maybe I might have done the same thing. The police didn't stop Tony in the car. We went... You're never going to believe this. What we decided to do was take it through the Blackwall Tunnel and drop it on the Richardson's patch. So that's what we did. We took it through the Blackwall Tunnel, and strangely enough, the car broke down outside a church, and there were confetti on the floor and everything else. And we went round in circles, finally found Tony, and he showed us where the car was. And that remained in my memory, that it was outside the church. It was Saturday night and the confetti was all around. And that was the last I heard of it. And then we went and saw, or Ronnie Bender went and told Charlie Kray. And Charlie hit the roof because he said, you know, there was other friends who lived on that manor as well, and it could fall on them. So apparently, so I'm led to believe the body was collected, the car was destroyed, and the body was taken out to sea and disposed of there. So we finished up at the Old Bailey on one of the longest murder trials in criminal history, culminated in getting life for a murder that I didn't commit. But at the end of the day, for 15 years I sat in prison, and the only person to come and see me whilst I was there, God rest his soul, was my father. Everybody else abandoned me. You know, I know what lonely is. I know what it is to feel you want to be close to people. No amount of money can give you that. No amount of money can give you the warmth and the feelings you get when you walk through your own front door. Peace of mind, you don't have to be looking over your shoulder because you're not doing anything wrong. You understand what I mean? It's always the right time to do the right thing. In any given situation, you have choices, right or wrong. That's life.
I remember Ronnie in Brixton when we was going up to it, 6 months we was travelling back and forwards to the Old Bailey. It was one of the longest trials in history. because they put the two trials together, didn't they? Then there was the Hat trial, and then the Cornell trial, then the Hat trial, and then when everyone was finished getting their 30 years, and they send you to all different parts of the country. They always seem to send you further away as possible, so your family's got to travel all day to visit you. Up in Durham and Full Sutton and places like that. You just have to get on with it. I mean, it's part of the course, as they say. You know, if you live this sort of life that I've led, then you expect a few hiccups along the way. And I paid my penalty for. I spent about 16 years inside, and I've always appeared at the #1 court. It's like people when they say, I was on Broadway, if you was a singer, I was at the #1 court at the Old Bailey, as though it's something special, you know. But it turns out I've been there every time I've been there, 6 times.
When I was in prison, and they got a letter smuggled into me, if the police come to see me, don't talk to them. Otherwise they're going to shoot my 2 kids, right? So anyway, there was 2 villains across the road, and then Peter crossed the landing for me, and I just got with my first heart attack then. Did you know Scaz Terry?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, Scaz Terry was the other one in there. I'll give him, he give Terry the letter, and Terry said, right away, well, I know that's from them 2 soppy bastards. Terry says to me, look, he said, even though you ain't going to the police then, he said, but you got to look at it this way. Someone might have to needle you outside or something, or want to get in favours with them. He said, and they might say, oh, we've heard Lenny Hammond has been talking to the old Bill back. He said, so you can risk having your kids shot? I said, no, not likely. He said, well, go and see the governor then, see what we do. So that's what I've done. That's how I come on the Kray case. And he got his first committal at the Old Bailey on my evidence, because I was the only torture one on the trial. You know, I didn't feel right doing it, because you don't, you know what I mean? You don't grasp, you know. That's our way of life, you know. But you can do anything to me they like, but don't threaten my family, you know. They were 6 and 7 at the time. You know. The judge looked at me in the box and he says to me, you feel all right? I said, not really. And they got me a chair to sit down. It was because Ronnie Kray kept staring at me, going, pulling faces, you know, because he was only just down there where I was here. So they got me a chair. When I sat on a chair, being little, I couldn't even see over the top. So that's why the judge done it, you know. But the police said to me, you done very well. Well, not very, I think you done a marvellous job. And he says to me, he said, Lenny, he said, I want to do them on the 2 murders, because I've got enough evidence for them on that. He said, so, and that prevent you and some other people going to the Old Bailey to give evidence. He said, because I think you've been through enough. And when Ronnie Kray got his committal, they all punched the air, the old Bill. We went out and got drunk that day, and I had to go back to the open nick.
On the 4th of March 1969 at the Old Bailey, both Reggie and Ronnie Kray were found guilty of Jack McVitie's murder. Jack's body has never been found. Thanks for watching this video on the brutal death of Jack the Hat McVitie. For more content like this on the most notorious gangsters across the world, make sure to subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. Drop a comment below if there's a gangster you want us to cover in our next video. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.